I have the great privilege of serving as one of the pastors here alongside many other wonderful leaders who help us do what it is that we do. And today we're going to begin by reading a story about a man named Bartimaeus. And the title of today's message is called Desperate for Change. Anybody desperate for change? Kind of, sort of, not really. You don't want to admit it? Okay. Let's read this story and then we'll dive into it. So here is what it says. At some point soon. My magic fingers. There we go. All right, let's see. Go backwards. Back one. No, you had it the first time. It's all right. We're working on it. Boom. There we go. Okay. Ready? And they called the blind man. No. Oh, it was the last one. Sorry. I messed up. It was my fault. That's my fault. Okay, that was my fault. The last one. This is like midway through the story. All right, here we go. There we go. He was right the whole time. Shout out to our volunteers. Okay, and they came to Jericho, and as he was leaving Jericho with his disciples, of course, speaking of Jesus, and a great crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind beggar, the son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and he said, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." And many people rebuked him and they told him to be silent. But he cried out all the more and said, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And then Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." And then they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take heart, get up, he is calling you." And throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. And Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the blind man said to him, "Rabbi, let me recover my sight." And Jesus said to him, "Go your way, your faith has made you well." And immediately the man recovered his sight and followed him on the way. So here, this story begins with Jesus, this itinerant rabbi preacher, going around from city to city, telling people about the good news of the kingdom of God. God is up to something in the world, and you have the opportunity to participate in this and join hands with God to bring about this greater reality for our world. But because Jesus was so unique and so special, as you notice in this story, everywhere Jesus would go, he was followed by a crowd. A really large crowd, because there was something about Jesus that was different than everybody else who was kind of talking about the sort of things that he was talking about. Jesus was a man who spoke with a very unique kind of authority. In fact, one of the questions that people would ask him all the time, we read in the Gospel of Mark, and you find this in many different Gospels, So they said, "By what authority do you do these things? Who gave you the authority to do them?" Because Jesus was a man who spoke with his own sort of authority. He didn't seem to be a person who was bound by the authority of the tradition of his day. He wasn't a person who was bound by the authority of the religious figures of his day. He wasn't even somebody who was necessarily bound by people's ideas of what his scriptures were supposed to be. Jesus was very selective in the scriptures that he quoted and the scriptures that he decided not to quote. Jesus was a man who spoke on his own authority, and he charted a new way. He opened up a new path. He taught people a totally new way of being and relating to the divine and to creation and to all of humanity. Which, by the way, isn't it interesting that for most of us who grew up in religion, we were never taught to trust our own inner authority? We were always taught to trust outer authorities. We were never taught to trust our actual experience of life. In fact, we were told it was a bad thing to think rationally and intellectually for yourself, especially if that means you're disagreeing with the way things have always been. And so if there's a woman who is obviously called to preach and to teach and to help people grow in their spiritual life, there's no way that that can be right, because this Bible verse says that, women should be silent in church and that women are not allowed to have authority over men. Or, for example, even though science tells us a totally new cosmic story about where we came from and where this whole thing is going, if that doesn't line up with a very literal reading of the book of Genesis, then there's no way that can be true. All that stuff is just false. We've got to just stick with this because this is what the Word of God says. Or if there are people from the LGBTQ community who happen to be living fruitful lives and who have relationships with God, there's no way that that can actually be true. There's no way that these person can actually participate in the life of the kingdom because we've got all these Bible verses here that tell us otherwise. And so Christians and religious people end up living in this cognitive dissonance. They end up creating their own sort of fantasy and reality that they live in because they're actually not allowed to really live in real life where things happen. Because you're not allowed to trust experience. You're not allowed to think for yourself. And so we never have been taught to trust our inner authority. We've only been told to trust outer authority. So if you grew up Catholic, that meant that you were told you needed to trust the authority of tradition, of the Christian tradition, as it was handed down to you by the Pope or the bishops or the church hierarchy. If you were a Protestant, you were told you have to submit to the authority of the Bible as it has been interpreted to you and for you by your denomination or your pastor or evangelicalism or whatever circle that you come from. What is the problem with all of these paradigms? At the end of the day, each of these frameworks don't teach you how to develop a faith for yourself. They give you a faith. They tell you what faith is. And so essentially our doctrines and our dogmas and our words end up becoming substitutes for our very own genuine experience of God. We're told what we need to believe, but we're not taught how to come up with our own belief system on our own. We're told this is the right answer, but we're not allowed to question or come up with our own answers. And that obviously can become very, very, very problematic. Jesus was somebody who operated in a totally different framework with a totally different worldview. He operated from this inner authority, the authority of the Spirit, which, by the way, is also dwelling within you and you and you and you and everybody else in this room. So this is why Jesus was so fascinating to people. But what's incredible is even though Jesus was fascinating to people and he attracted people, it's not so much about how many people were in the crowd when Jesus was talking. What's really unique is about the kind of people who were in the crowd when Jesus was talking. And I don't think we've actually really confronted this as Christians. You know, Jesus did not attract people who were rich, people who were famous, people who were successful, people who lived middle-class, comfortable lives. No, Jesus attracted the lowly. Jesus attracted the homeless. Jesus attracted the sick. Jesus attracted those who were excluded by the society of his day. Those were the people that he lived with. Those were the people that he talked to. Those are the people that he identified himself with. Those are the people that he loved. Those are the folks that he actually said the kingdom of heaven belong to. You see, the authenticity of someone's Christianity is always measured by that person's solidarity with the poor, the marginalized, and the oppressed of our world. Because God is a God of the oppressed. And so there's no such thing as a Christian spirituality that does not involve things like taking care of those who are poor and standing up for those who cannot stand up for themselves and being a voice for those who are voiceless and being strong for those who feel weak in and of themselves. I mean, it's what we're all about. Think about the central symbol within Christianity, the cross. What is the cross? The cross is our symbol of an innocent human being, Jesus, dying because of the sins of the guilty. He died because of the religious authorities of his day who abused their power. He died because of the governmental forces of his day who were threatened by the message that he was preaching of inclusivity and equality for all people. And so an innocent man had to die because of the sins of the guilty. Well, guess what? Our lens needs to be a cruciform lens. We need to look at the world through the lens of the cross. And anywhere we see Calvary, anywhere we see the cross happening over and over and over again, anytime we see innocent people suffering because of the sins of guilty people who are abusing their power and their privilege, it is our duty to go out of our way and move towards those people in love and in compassion and in service. That's what the whole Christian life is all about. That's why in the book of James it says real religion, true religion is about caring for the orphan, taking care of the widow. This isn't like a side thing. That's what I'm trying to help us overcome. For many of us, we thought doing all those good things was like just an extra part of what it means to be a Christian. No. That's what it means to follow Jesus. To follow Jesus is to give your life in service to those who are excluded by everybody else. It's to give your life in selfless love and generosity and compassion towards people who are hurting and who feel alone and who feel like they have no purpose. I love this story of Mother Teresa. Everybody knows Mother Teresa, right? You know, what an amazing woman. She spent and devoted really most of her life to helping those who were sick and poor and experiencing the worst of life. Well, one day she was awarded with the Nobel Peace Prize. There's probably no greater honor in the world than to be a recipient of that award. Well, did you know typically when you win the Nobel Peace Prize, they throw like this big old banquet for you? A huge party that costs a whole lot of money. And there's many influential, powerful people in that room, all focusing on you and celebrating you and supporting you and all of the incredible things that you've done and the example that you've set for humanity. Did you know that when Mother Teresa won the Nobel Peace Prize, she actually asked for them not to throw her a dinner banquet celebration? Instead, she asked for all of that money that would be used to throw her banquet and her party to be given and donated to people who were sick and poor in India. That ended up being $192,000. First of all, who thinks about that? You know what I mean? Like, this is your night. You've given so much of yourself. You always put other people in front of yourself. You have one night to make it about you, but you choose not to make it so because that's not even how you're wired. You're just so used to giving your life in service to other people that it doesn't even feel right necessarily to celebrate in this way. Think about how incredible and amazing it would be if you and I adopted that mindset of serving first, of giving first, of loving first. Even Jesus said, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life away as a ransom for many. That's what happens when you give your life away, is when you truly begin to find it. When you lose your life in service to others, that's when you truly begin to discover what real life really is. And so if even just once in our lifetime, every one of us can decide to do one big extravagant act of generosity just like she did, think about how much better our world will be. That's what God is calling us to do as followers of Jesus. Now, going back to the story of Bartimaeus, you will notice that up to this point, this was the first time that Bartimaeus had ever had an encounter with Jesus. Up to this point, this sick, blind man had never actually met Jesus face to face. He had only heard about him. And so he was a sick person who needed healing. He was a hurting person who needed transformation and change. But for all he knew, Jesus could have just been a fraud. He could have just been a crazy man. Everybody was saying that he was a miracle worker, but he actually never had an interaction with Jesus himself. So how do you know this guy isn't just crazy and all of these claims that people make are false? And yet, in spite of all of those things and all of those doubts that I'm sure were present in his mind, Bartimaeus decides to press in. He still decides to move towards Jesus and to open his heart up to the transformation that God could bring into his life through Christ. Why would he do that? I'm reading into the story a little bit, but I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say that Bartimaeus was a man who was all out of options. I mean, he had been trying his whole life to fix his situation, to get help. He was praying and praying and praying for God to do something about the fact that he was like this. He was all out of options. And because he was all out of options, he was willing to do anything. He was willing to go absolutely anywhere just so that he can experience change, just so that he can experience some sort of transformation in his life. Bartimaeus was desperate. And it was his desperation that ultimately brought him to his healing. It was his lowest moment that eventually ended up bringing him to his freest moment, his highest moment, as we read at the end of the story. See, this is why for those of us who consider ourselves to be people of faith, we aren't fazed by the circumstances and situations that we deal with in life. We aren't people who allow ourselves to be shaken at the core and shaken at the foundation just because things aren't going the way that we want them to go, because we know there is a God who is actively at work in every single situation, always trying to do everything in God's power to bring about the highest possible good. And so we look out at life and we look out at all of our experiences through the lens of faith, through the lens of hope, through the lens of optimism, always believing the best because we know that all things are working together for our good. We're always believing for a better tomorrow because we know that nothing is happening to us. Everything is happening for us. All of our experiences are moments in where we can encounter God, even the bad ones, even the difficult ones, even the ones we rather not be going through. And so we live with this open-hearted gratitude, receiving the way that God comes to us in any and every given situation. Think about that. If you can just focus on how God is approaching you through this particular breakup, if you could just focus on how God is speaking to you in and through this job loss, if you can just focus on all of the ways that God is trying to work in you and through you as you're dealing with the betrayal, that changes your attitude. Now you become somebody who has a much more positive outlook because you're not allowing yourself to get lost in the negativity of your mind. Instead, you're understanding God is always coming to me disguised as my life. So let me pay attention to the way that God is showing up here, now, even through this. Isn't it true that sometimes it takes us like getting to our lowest moment, getting to that breaking point, getting to the end of our rope for us to wake up? And for us to realize some things? It's almost as if God has no other way of talking to us. It's almost as if God has no other way of reaching out to us and saying, wake up. There's something more. Unless he does it through our suffering. We don't pay attention any other way, it seems like. That's the human predicament. But that's exactly why in the book of James it says we can consider it pure joy when we go through different trials in life. Why? Because we know what those trials are going to produce in our life. We've been in situations like this before, and we've made it through. And not only did we make it through, we made it through to the other side stronger than we were before. And so whatever it is I'm facing now, I've been here before, and I know what it's like, and I know I'll get through it. And once I get through it on the other side, I'm going to be a much better person. I'm going to be a much healthier person. I'm going to be a much more balanced person, and my life will be all the better because of it. We know that in every situation, God is working to produce in our lives Christ-likeness, Christ consciousness, union with himself and with other people. And so what is there not to celebrate? How could you not look out at life with such a sense of hope and positivity when you know that everything is always working in your favor? Really, everything is always working in your favor. Whatever you're going through right now, you're going through it because you need it. How do I know you need it? Because you're going through it. Really? That's it. And so the moment, I love how one teacher says it, whatever you're going through in life, you need to learn how to accept it as if you chose it. Ooh, that's tough. That's hard. But that's called facing reality. And it's not until you stop resisting reality and you start to face reality and embrace reality and live in harmony with reality, even if it seems really skewed and messed up and it's bringing you a lot of suffering. It's not until you get to that point where you start living in harmony with what is that you can experience joy. Accept it as if you chose it, because the more you try and deny it, the more you try and think about, because that's what my mind does. It's like when something bad happens, I automatically either complain about the past. You know, if this person wouldn't have done this, then this wouldn't be happening right now. You know, I wish this wouldn't have happened, because if this wouldn't have happened, then that wouldn't have happened, and then we wouldn't be in this situation right now. So I just keep replaying all of the things that went wrong. Or if I'm not living in the past, I'm all the way out there in the future talking about, oh my goodness, now that this happens, that means XYZ is going to happen too. And now, because this happened, that means my whole life is over. Huh? What? And then we start freaking out and becoming fearful, anxious people over things that we're imagining in our head, things that aren't even true. It's not true because it's not here. The future is not here. The past is not here. All that we have is right now. And if you welcome what's coming to you right now with faith, with hope, with positivity, with love, if you look for God in the here and now, you will find God in the here and now. I mean, that's what Jesus said. If you ask, you will receive. Seek, and you will find. What are you seeking for in those difficult moments of your life? Are you seeking for an excuse to be down and negative? And are you seeking for somebody to pin the blame on so that you don't have to take responsibility for yourself? Or are you seeking for growth? Are you seeking for transformation? Are you seeking for a newness of life? If that's what you are seeking, it doesn't matter what it is that you're facing. You will find it. God will meet you there. This is why they say change only happens when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change. Think about that statement. It's the only way. I wish we weren't so hard-headed as human beings, but it's just the way that we are. Change only happens when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change. I can't bear life like this anymore, and so I have to change and switch things up. But the moment you do that, the moment you come to the end of yourself, you see, it's not until you are emptied of yourself that you can then be filled with God. Really. You'll never know how powerful God is until you come to realize how powerless you are. It all begins with surrender. The whole thing begins with surrender. So you got to learn how to choose your pain. Any path you choose in life is going to be painful, by the way. It's either the pain of staying the same or it's the pain of change. But either way, it's going to be painful. And I tell people this all the time, especially my friends who are in recovery, especially the friends that I work with at the homeless shelter every day who have been through it. And they've dug such a deep hole for themselves. Climbing up out of this thing seems almost like an impossibility. And many of us in this room, we know what that feels like as well. But I tell them, you've got to know your progress back to a healthy, balanced place, your journey towards a better you is going to involve a whole lot of difficulties. You've got to know that going into it. Otherwise, as you start taking steps towards a better you, you're going to think there's something wrong because things don't seem to be going your way. Oh, no. That doesn't mean anything's wrong. That means everything's going right. Now what needs to shift is just your perspective. All that needs to shift now is your perspective. Once you're able to shift your perspective and see all of this as that which is working in your favor, Romans chapter 8, if God is for you, who could be against you? If God is with us, what does it matter if anybody else is not with? We've got all we need. Do you know what I mean? So the way, like an example that I use all the time is with myself in the gym. I love to work out. It's what I've been doing this since I was in high school. So I'm either at home reading or at work or in the gym. That's what I do. Well, being in the gym all the time is not easy. You know, it's very taxing on your body, especially when you lift a lot. So I'm always tired. You know, my body's always sore. I'm always craving pizza or ice cream because I'm, depriving myself during the week, eating really healthy food. But it's painful. But guess what? This pain that I experienced from working out really hard, the soreness, now that my wife bought a Peloton bike. You guys know what Peloton is? Dude, I'm a Peloton person now. Seriously, it's basically like this, what do you call it? It's like a bike. It's for cycling, but there's a TV screen and you get to take classes live with people from all over the world, or you get to do some classes on demand. If you're thinking about doing it, don't, because it's like a lot of money to buy the machine. But because it was so much money and we got it, now we're like committed to this thing. It's killing my legs. I'm sweating so much. It's so difficult. But here's the thing. I put myself through that pain. And I welcome and I embrace that pain because I know what it's going to produce in my life. I know what it's going to produce in my life. I know in those last 10 minutes when this lady is yelling at me on that screen, telling me, come on, you can do this. Don't give up. Don't give up. You're a boss. You're a boss. That's what the lady that I listened to, that's what she said. You're a boss. You're a boss, and you got this. I'm going to ride with you. And I'm not going to lie, there was one time Emily was in the room, and I just, I was so mad that she said we were about to do another 1 minute thing of like 100%. I flicked off the screen. And it's like, dude, what? I'm like, I'm so mad. Why is she making us do another? It's painful. It's hard. It's hard. But I know what that pain is going to produce in my life. But guess what? Let's say I wanted to opt out of that kind of pain. Does that mean my life would be painless? No. Because guess what? Me not working out, me not eating healthy, that's going to produce some pain too. First, it may produce some pain that comes from having a lack of self-confidence, because I don't feel good about myself, because I'm not operating to my fullest potential physically. It could come with a lot of health issues in my future if I'm not careful. So I just have to choose, which pain do I want to bear? Which pain do you want to bear? The pain of doing nothing? The pain of staying the same, which is just going to make things worse? Or the pain that's going to produce something really good, really beautiful, really productive for your life? I'm going to choose that pain. I don't know about you, but I'm always choosing that pain. This is why desperate people are the ones that find their healing, because they've already experienced the worst of the worst. So now there's nothing left to fear. I mean, what could possibly happen to me that hasn't happened already? I've already hit rock bottom. How could it get any worse than this? I don't have any fear anymore. I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to take risks. I'm going to do everything it is that God's put in my heart to do, because what do I have to lose? I have nothing else to lose. Some of us just got to get desperate again. We got to get desperate when it comes to the dreams that God's put in our heart. We got to get desperate when it comes to the goals that we have in life. We've got to get desperate when it comes to our change, our transformation, our healing, our wholeness, our maturity. It's the only way. It's the only way that those things are going to come. Desperation is like the breeding ground for success. Desperation is the breeding ground for transformation in life. I actually like how Jim Carrey put it, if y'all want to look at this quote. Desperation is a necessary ingredient to learning anything or creating anything, period. If you're not desperate at some point, you're just not interesting. Isn't it true? The best stories come out of desperation. The best transformation begins with desperation. And so if you are in a place of desperation, if you feel like you're at the end of the rope, if you don't know where you're going to turn to from here, this is actually the time when you need to put a smile on your face, dig your heels in deep, and keep putting one foot in front of the other, because something good is going to happen in your life. Of course, if you want it to, right? Because life is whatever you want it to be. Reality is really just a reflection of what we are. And so if you want life to be beautiful and good, it can be. And it happens by choosing happiness every moment, choosing joy every moment, choosing love every moment, choosing gratitude. That word, we're going to have things coming with that word, because, wow, when you live with gratitude, oh my goodness, it just changes the flow of life. Everything about life begins to change. So, desperation is important. Now, going back to this story, you will notice that when Bartimaeus cries out for help, when he cries out to Jesus, anybody remember what the crowds were doing during that time? What even some of the disciples were doing during that time? They tried to silence him. The more he would speak out, the more they would try and get him to shut up. And yet, the more they would try and get him to shut up, the louder he would begin to speak. The more he would begin to cry out. It was like fuel added to his fire. Oh, you said I can't do this? Watch me do it. Watch me do it. I'm going to do it just because you said I can't do it. There's no such thing as growth without criticism. You know this, but I'm just going to remind you again. There is no such thing as growth and transformation in life without criticism, which is exactly why you just need to learn how to do you. You need to get in your pocket. You need to come to an awareness of who you are, and you need to learn how to live in the fullness of that without caring about what anybody else has to think or say about it. Why? Because whatever path that you choose in life, it will come with criticism. So if you're going to get criticized, you might as well get criticized for being yourself. You might as well get criticized for doing what you love. You might as well get criticized for being 110% you, so that you don't have to apologize for anything anymore. That's why I love when, sometimes I'll have people who've been with us at Heartway for like a while. And even though I've been on a journey, and my spirituality and my theology has shifted as I've been leading this community, but most people who have been with us from the beginning see that in a way that's different than a lot of you who just kind of jumped in year 2, or you just jumped in year 3. Like, I've actually made a lot of progress, and there's been a lot of change. And so I love when there's certain people who will come up to me and say, Danny, there's just something, you look so free. You look so free. Because there was a lot of times when if I would say something that I know would be a shocker, or if I knew it's something that a lot of y'all weren't used to hearing, because that's not what people say typically in environments like this that are more traditional or conservative, I used to be really apologetic about it. Now I'm just like, this is what I have to say. This is what I see. If you have a problem with it, you can email info@heartwaychurch.com, and it's going to the spam. Really. But I'm totally free to be me, because I finally realized either way, I'm going to get criticized for this. This is already hard. So if I'm going to get criticized, if I'm going to have people say negative things, it might as well be for something that I really feel a conviction about. It might as well be for me being 110% fully myself, fully who I am. So you've got to stay true to you. And you have to recognize that on this journey of life, you will outgrow certain people, and that's totally okay. Some of these people that you're going to outgrow are your closest people. And they may not understand your decisions. But guess what? They don't have to. Because you didn't make those decisions for them. You made them for you. And if they love you, they will support you. And if they love you, they'll be behind you. They don't have to understand your journey. Why? Because it's not their journey. It's your journey. That's all it is. And so if they don't know how to respect that, those aren't people that you need in your life. You need to stay true to who you are and to who God has created you to be. That's when you begin to flourish. That's when you will begin to see change and transformation happen in your life. Now, I want to wrap up by taking you to this one verse. Mark chapter 10, verse 49. This is the moment that Bartimaeus gets close to finally receiving some closure in this area of his life with his blindness. It's how he encounters his healing. After he was yelling and crying out and trying to get Jesus' attention, it says Jesus stopped and he said, call him. And they called the blind man, saying to him, take heart, get up. He is calling you. I don't know what some of y'all are facing in here this morning, but I think those words that Jesus said to him on that day are the same words that God is saying to you right now. Whatever it is you're facing, however difficult it may be, you may not seem like you have it all together right now. You may not know where the next check is going to come in from. You don't know how or where that next door is going to open, but you need to take heart. You need to get up because God is calling you. He's calling you to a better tomorrow. He's calling you to a better future. He's calling you to hope. He's calling you to peace. He's calling you to strength. But you've got to take heart. And you've got to get up off of the ground and do something. It works both ways. And that's what's so beautiful to me about the good news. Even when we feel ignored, even when we feel like we're not being noticed, even when we feel like we're being overlooked, God sees, God understands, God notices. And in the same way that God notices us, even when other people don't notice us, our job is to notice those people who are being ignored as well. It's our sacred calling. It's to move towards people who are on the margins of society, to move towards people who are hurting and who need healing, and to remind them that they matter, to remind them that they have hope, to remind them that they have the strength, they have the ability to do this. And it's like the scriptures say, when we are weak, he is strong. So again, you're feeling weak. You're feeling down and out. You're feeling like you don't know how you're going to get the strength to be able to go another day. You're exactly where you need to be. This is exactly where you need to be. And maybe your mantra needs to just be, when I am weak, he is strong. When I am weak. And that's just what you're whispering under your breath when you're getting those text messages. That's what you whisper under your breath when your mind feels like going in a million different directions. When I am weak, he is strong. If you're weak, if you're desperate, if you don't know how anything is going to change, open your heart. Be ready to receive. Start looking for God's goodness, and you will find it. You will find it. Now, I want to end with one last passage of scripture right along these lines. Mark 10:51. This is what Jesus says to Bartimaeus to end their encounter together. Jesus says to him, go your way. Your faith has made you well. Whose faith made him well? His faith made him well. So Jesus, before this, asked him, what do you want me to do for you? What do you want me to do for you? I want you to help me see. Jesus replies by saying, go your way. Your faith has made you well. Some of us are sitting around waiting for God to intervene from the heavens. God is just going to change the situation. God is just going to do it all by God's self. Meanwhile, God's saying, no, you don't get it. It's your faith that will make you well. It's your faith. We have the great privilege and honor of cooperating with God. So I love how some theologians speak of us as human beings as co-creators with God. We get to co-create our reality with God. We don't have some sort of fate that is inevitable. There isn't some sort of predestined future that God has in mind for us that we just have to go down that path no matter what. No. The future is open and you get to create it with God. What do you want it to be? I want it to be faith. I want it to be love. I want it to be hope. I want it to be positivity. I want it to be transformation. I want it to be growth. And so that's exactly what my life is going to be. Once you make that decision, that's it. It's just a matter of continuing to make that decision every day. Really. But you just have to decide to be happy. And I know it sounds so simple that it's going to go over most of your heads. But happiness is not something external from you. Peace is not something external from you. Joy is not something that you grab or attain from the outside. Peace and joy and happiness are things that we create. It comes from within. You already got it inside of you. All you need to do is choose it over and over and over again. It's your faith that will make you well. And it's God's grace that will help you to get to that place where you can say, I am well. I love how the old Christian hymn says it. It is well with my soul. How good would it be in life? No, I'm not singing it. How good would it be in any storm, in any situation in life, to be able to just take a breath and say, it is well with my soul. It's always well with your soul. You just either wake up to that reality or you don't. You let some things clutter that reality or you don't. I'm in that decluttering stage. Everything in my life that is getting in the way of me tapping into the person that God has created me to be, sorry, thank you, next. Thank you, next. Really, that's how I do it. That thought comes up, thank you, next. I want to start blaming somebody else for my issues, thank you, next. I want to start getting fearful and anxious about all the things that may go wrong in my future, which I do all the time. Thank you. Next. I'm choosing peace now. I'm choosing hope now. Let's pray. Father, this morning we just open up our hearts to receive your goodness and your love that comes to us in a million different ways. God, today in our desperation, in our weakness, in our powerlessness, we look to you and we look out at life through the lens of faith, through the lens of hope, knowing that you're always with us, that we're never alone, that you're always working in each and every situation to bring about the highest possible good. And so, God, we're going to trust in you and we're going to seek you and we're going to find you. We're going to find you. God, you always come to us disguised as our life. May we begin to develop the eyes to see and the ears to hear all of the ways in which you are approaching us and teaching us in any given moment. We refuse to give in to the negativity and the bitterness and the anxiety of our minds. And we believe and we choose joy in this moment and for every moment because of you and because of your goodness. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Awesome. Hey, let's put our hands together and thank God for bringing us here this morning. Thank you guys for being here with us. Next weekend's going to be awesome. Make sure you invite a few friends. And last but not least, if you haven't signed up for this kickball tournament against the Miramar Police Department, please do it. I don't want to come out there with a skinny squad. I need people who are ready to play. Love you guys. Have a great rest of the week.